I will try to be brief and on time. So after the turbulent decade of the 90s, Yugoslav war and Slobodan Milošević regime fall, Serbia entered a period of relative stability, which was marked on one hand by the beginning of democratization process. However, on the other hand, there is a complete division within a society, and this polarization still exists, and it continues so far. But as a result of Yugoslav wars, ethnic conflicts continue as ethnic tensions, and especially between Serbs and Albanians in Kosovo. And this is something that is a long-lasting process. But there is also religious divisions among the local Muslim population in Serbia, and also a religious division between the Muslim population and the Serbian majority. There is a ideologically motivated intolerance between the right-wing and the left-wing groups, and there is a huge hatred towards the members of LGBTQ community, Roma, refugees, and other migrants. Many of these cases were violent, but none of those were labeled as act of terrorism, and those were mainly marked as violent incidents. So when it comes to, this was an introduction, but when it comes to radicalization in Serbia, for this last 20 years that I try to wrap up, so it's pretty obvious that Serbia has all four types of the radicalism. So there's ethno-nationalist or separatism, Islamic extremism, right-wing and left-wing radicalization. Terrorism is not the #1 threat, not at all, and this was confirmed by various reports that were published in the past 5 to 10 years. The main potential terrorism issue would be some kind of a lone actor terrorism that might happen. But there is the radicalization of the right-wing groups, and the right-wing extremism is on the rise. And this is extremely important, and the next slide is going to go more deeply into it, because the prevention is lacking. When it comes to the, let's say, the fights against the radicalization, we not necessarily need to do that. But what needs to exist is the prevention of it, which is completely lacking. And Serbian, which is why the nationalism is the major issue, and Serbian far right is mostly evolved around this nationalistic ideology. From the it's basically connected to the conflicts from the 90s, because the aims of the right wingers in Serbia is to prevent further territorial repatriation, and eventually, basically, the idea is to reunify with the alleged Serbian lands, so which are almost in the older countries in the Balkans, so in the Bosnia and Herzegovina, Montenegro, North Macedonia, Croatia, Kosovo, and even Albania. So this is this idea of the mythological idea of the Greater Serbia. And it was led by this, so the whole right wing is basically led by this mythological ideology. But in order to reach their goal, they advocate many things, and those are really radical. So, for example, there is a militarization, restrictions of democratic freedom, cessation of the EU accession talks, and consolidation around Serbian traditions. So basically, one kind of conservative traditionalist point of view that is, of course, anti-neoliberalism, anti-immigration, and almost always, let's put it this way, sometimes, of course, anti-establishment, even though establishment is really hugely involved, but also anti-imperialism, which is like a hard word to use, but almost always spin over there. And I highlighted some of the keywords over there that you may see in the presentation that can describe the right-wing groups and organizations in Serbia. But I would like, and there are many of these, but I would like to pull out a few. One is hooliganism, which is, I mean, there is a lot of, it's really interesting how important and powerful are the Serbian football supporters or fans as a political, but also different actors at the moment. But there is also humanitarianism, because sometimes the right-wing groups are working in a humanitarian, as a humanitarianist in a support. I mean, they're providing support for the vulnerables, in a sense that they are going to be more visible as some kind of propaganda, while this way they're also promoting their values, which is of course this traditionalism that I tried to explain. And there is a huge there's a huge anti-vaccination movement, or no vax, because it's 1/3 of the country. They are not the supporters necessarily of the right-wing groups, but there is a 1/3 of the country that are anti-vaccination, which is extremely, when it comes to this kind of a public opinion pool. And the last slide, I would like to comment just on the radicalization programs and give a small example on the situation in Serbia that better describes everything that I spent the time in the last 3 slides. But when it comes to the radicalization programs, there is a lack of continuity in the creation and implementation of the programs, of course. Those were mainly small-scale projects implemented, mostly financed by the international community, so the international organizations, but without any kind of the major results. And there is, of course, the lack of the cooperation between the state actors and the civil society. And to come finally to this example and to conclude with this is something which is not a part of this report, but is going to be part of WP4 report. And it's a treatment of the foreign fighters in Serbia, and the court cases that are happening here. So Serbia didn't have many foreign fighters. It's around 30 people so far, this contemporary foreign fighters, so since 2012. But the Serbian normative framework is rather punitive and restrictive. They're preventive and integrative. But when it comes to the treatment of foreign fighters, there's a completely different treatment, because those who return from Ukraine, who were fighting on the Russian side in Crimea, they receive a status of a mercenaries in a conflict, while those who return from Syria or Iraq were prosecuted as terrorists. And the court basically, what they did, so those who fight with the Orthodox brothers in Ukraine and in Crimea, courts basically punished them on it was either house arrest, or they weren't even punished, while those who came back from Syria or Iraq, prosecuted as terrorists, received the punishment, so the sentences between 6 and 9 years of prison. And as a result, basically Muslim perceive Serbian authorities and of course court to be an anti-Muslim, which can result in accepting more extremistic views and taking radical actions. But also this needs to be emphasized that the both right-wing and the Islamist extremists can reinforce each other this way, because this is something that that may continue. So, but this is my presentation. Thank you so much.